What's up? I'm Red Fox. Please ignore the hair. We're in the process of doing stuff to it again. But anyway, so this is going to be my very first review. And I am reviewing A Dom's Guide to BDSM Volume 1 by Matthew Larocco. I want to kind of do this no-nonsense review of the book itself. Now, this book is a volume 1 out of 3 volumes. Before I begin, I think I should disclose that I am in no way affiliated with this author or with a publisher. I bought this book with my own money. I'm not paid to do this in any way. I'm not getting anything out of it, but I just think it's an interesting book that to review at the moment. So if you're looking for a book that is a beginner's guide to doming in BDSM world, this could actually be a good starting point. However, I don't think that this is the only book you should read. Now, there are several problems with this book. Like, throughout the 3 volumes, it seems like the author has kind of gone in and out of a relationship. At least that's what it kind of feels like. Some of the tips are a bit contradictory. Also, another downside to this book is that there's no real information on the author itself, so there's no way of knowing who this Matthew Larocco is. There's no description of age or what their credentials are, what kind of history this person has within the BDSM community. So because there's no information on the author, it's really hard to see how well these tips do apply, how accurate these tips are. Now, based on my experience with BDSM, some of these tips are actually quite good, especially for beginners. This book kind of walks through a few important steps, like how to think and act like a dom, what the slave expects from you, what not to do, and what instincts you do not want to follow, your motivation and goals, how to find out a sub's taboo. So the subtitle of this book is 49 Must-Know Tips on How to Be the Perfect Dom/Master Your Submissive Will Truly Respect and Admire. And this book is kind of peppered with tips throughout the whole book. It is a very short one. There's about 104 pages on this volume 1, which makes me wonder, because all the other volumes are also about the same amount of pages, makes me wonder if it wouldn't have been more useful if all of these were published under one book. Now, that's not to say that these tips you cannot find online. You definitely can find a lot of the information online, but it's kind of nice to have it all in one place. I think it is quite handy. Initially, the book starts with focusing on psychological origins of BDSM. So it has a bit of background history on BDSM. There are some worrying parts, so there's one particular part which I was kind of I don't quite like this a lot, the way it sounds. When it's talking about the origins of BDSM, and it kind of involves slavery. Doesn't necessarily mention, slavery in the Americas, for example. There's one particular passage where it says that slaves did they enjoyed being slaves. I don't know. It doesn't sound quite accurate, no. But it does talk a lot about consent, even like mentioned in the Kama Sutra. It talks about Marquis de Sade, about, sadomasochism, Leopold von Sacher-Masoch. That's a hard name to pronounce. It talks about misconceptions about the dynamic and the lifestyle, which is actually quite interesting. Once again, this is a book that is geared towards mostly the beginners, so it gives you a good primer on what BDSM is and more importantly, what it isn't. So it talks about, obviously, how there's no actual abuse in BDSM, how consent is very important. It doesn't necessarily mention SSC, safe, sane, and consensual, or RAC. This doesn't come actually down until, I guess, volume 2 or volume 3 of the book, which is a bit worrying because it's kind of like a basic information you should know. The book also seems to be a bit outdated because it says that it is BDSM is actually classified as a mental disorder, but it hasn't been so since the DSM-5. So according to the DSM-5, which is kind of the manual that psychologists and psychiatrists use to diagnose mental disorders, BDSM, or the sort of the perversion, sexual perversion, hasn't been on that manual since the 5th edition, which is the newest one, launched in 2013. While the book does kind of put the male as the dominant and the female as the sub, it does kind of mention that obviously it is possible, to have the other way around, or the dom can be non-binary, for example, so is the sub. It does kind of just touch briefly on it. Doesn't really talk much about it. But it does recognize it, and it kind of, but it does let you know that this book is kind of treating the male as the dom and the female as the sub from this point onwards. But it is inclusive of all different types of genders, at least kind of in a just over there, just barely touching it. It also lists the misconceptions of BDSM, which is quite interesting. Bashes on 50 Shades of Grey because, that's not really BDSM, that's just fucking abuse. And the author does kind of defend that you should do some more research, not just use that one book as your main, research point, I guess. So as you also read throughout the other books, the author's viewpoints seem to be quite inconsistent throughout the books. So you might want to keep that in mind. So always, read it and take the information with a bit of grain of salt, essentially. So yeah, I would say out of 5, I would give it probably a 3.5 spankings for the book itself, at least volume 1. The fact that there is no information on the author itself is kind of a bit worrying. There's no way to contact them. But it is definitely a good beginner's guide for people who are just starting into BDSM and want to know what is the reason behind it all. The author doesn't get into actual BDSM scenes until volume 2. Yeah, it doesn't actually get into BDSM play until volume 3. But yeah, it does give you a primer on, what it is, what it means to be a Dom, and how it is important for a Dom to care for their sub. Essentially saying that a Dom's job is to care about their sub, is to make them feel better. The sub is the one that is in control of the relationship because they have to agree to the contract beforehand, before you start. They have to be aware of what to expect, and you have to be aware of what you can offer and what you can expect from your sub, and vice versa. So it is it is an interesting read, definitely. And I guess it does it for this very first review. On my next video, I'm going to review the second and third volumes of this book and eventually get to the Submissive Guide to BDSM. Special thanks to Eris for her talking points on this quick review. And also thank you for watching. Make sure to subscribe, leave a comment, if you want me to talk about any specific books, BDSM related or not, I'm quite happy to do so. I would say share this video with your friends if you want to, if you have kinky friends. If not, maybe leave it out this time. But do make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and follow me on TikTok if you don't already. Follow me on Instagram. I'll leave all the links on the screen or in the description below. Yeah, I'll talk to you next time. Stay kinky, my friends.